Yeah, my name is Matthew Richey. I am the department chair of the Bible department, and I have been a teacher at SCA for 8 years. I teach classes both on the Old Testament and the New Testament. I teach a class on theology, an introduction to systematic theology, and then I have taught classes on apologetics, on world religions, and on the Christian life. So yeah, for my undergrad, I went to Liberty University in Virginia, and then I came out to Washington State and did an MDiv and a THM at Northwest Baptist Seminary, which is now Corban University. Yeah, as I approach teaching the Bible, it's what I'm attempting to do is build a bridge between the world that we live in and the world of the text, the world of Scripture. And so I usually begin by thinking about questions that come from our daily lives and things that students might be struggling with, or questions that students may have, things that sometimes we might be wrestling with. And I use that as a bridge to the text. Mm-hmm. And so I also spend a lot of time when I'm teaching Old and New Testament and talk about the world of the text and the culture and the background. And I really have the conviction that the more you understand something, the more interesting it becomes. And so understanding that the world in which the Bible was written makes the Bible actually gives you a lot more layers of understanding, makes it come alive, makes it interesting. With theology, my goal is not to replicate. I always say I don't want to make you little Mr. Richeys. I'm trying to help them to become theologians on their own, young mm-hmm. theologians, little theologians, but to be able to grapple with the issues that we struggle with, that we wrestle with, and to make their faith their own is really my goal as we study theology. And so there's often, a lot of times, theology, there's the issues that people argue about and struggle with, and I often don't tell them what I myself believe, because my goal isn't for them to replicate me. My goal is for them to wrestle with those issues on their own, and I believe that builds a stronger faith. Yeah, I think the Bible is one of those books that you can read and you can basically understand it on a first read. Mm-hmm. But there's so many layers to Scripture. Some of that comes from experience. I think of the Psalms. The Psalms are coming from experiences, sometimes of deep trouble, deep lament, deep pain, sometimes of joy, sometimes rejoicing in who God is, sometimes experiences in worshiping God for who He is. And as you grow older, your experiences change the way you interact with the Bible. There's also different layers of understanding, and that sometimes the Bible is not interesting because you haven't asked the right questions. And so one of my main goals is to teach students how to ask questions and how to ask the right questions. And when you ask the right questions, you start to see that sometimes the Bible is the goal that the Bible has is different than what you originally would have thought it was. And there's so many layers of meaning and understanding that you can glean that you don't get from just the first reading. Mm-hmm. So I think the Bible's a book that's so deep, it's so and broad at the same time that there's no end. To studying Scripture.
Obviously at SCA we talk a lot about biblical integration in all subjects, right? Uh-huh. Is that something that you're involved in as the Bible chair? Mm-hmm. I mean, do you meet with your faculty peers and
Yeah, I do. I'm very passionate about, sometimes we call it SCA biblical saturation. Okay. And I'm really passionate about working cross disciplines. Mm-hmm. For instance, if you're reading, I don't know that we read this at SCA, but I read White Fang and Call the Wild to my children recently. And this is written by an atheist, by Jack London. But there's so much you can have conversations with about how that connects to worldviews and how the differences between, say, reading Jack London and reading C.S. Lewis. Jack London is a fantastic writer. He's engaging. But he has a much different view of what the world is, what life is, what the meaning of life is. And I think it's very beneficial to think about books like Call the Wild through a theological lens. Even with math and science, obviously there's in apologetics class, sometimes a lot of scientific issues come up. We talk about that. History too. Sometimes one of the struggles with being a Christian, I would say, you look at Christians in the past and things that they've done that we would mourn at, hopefully. And so you have, so then struggling with a Christian view of history is also something that I think is valuable and important, and will help students prepare for challenges that they may have in the future.
I mean, what do you feel like we offer here? I mean, not like a direct comparison to their schools. I don't know what they teach, but I mean, like, what's the benefit of SCA? What are we offering that makes people should come here?
Well, I'll speak at least for my classes. I think that something that we do well in the Bible department is, although it is important to know what to believe, and there's a certain range of what we say is orthodox. We believe in the Trinity. We believe in salvation by grace through faith alone, and all those things. But it's not enough in our day and age to just know what to think and what to believe. We live in a day and age where critical thinking is so important. And so I think in the Bible department, I work really hard at teaching students how to think and not just what to think. And so that hopefully their faith isn't dependent upon me or their pastors or their parents, that they're building a foundation and knowing how to approach issues of the future, because who knows what in 2040 will be the issues that we'll be struggling with and wrestling with. They're not going to be the same issues as today. And so just knowing what to think will never prepare you for future issues, but knowing how to think does. And I think that that's something that we do well.